This is the life story of Theodore Klein, video number 9. We were talking over Shabbos, and as we were talking, a lot of new stories came out about different instances, really about racial relations in the Bronx at the time you were growing up, and how the neighborhood changed and how that affected you. And I know you had a story about your friend George, and a different story about when you were walking home from school. Why don't you tell some of those stories?
Well, basically, I'm a peaceful person, but there were always incidents happening. Number one, I went to junior high school, and that junior high school in 1941, very early 1940s, was a very integrated school. It was probably close to 60-40 white, or if not, then it was 50-50 between whites and blacks kids in the school. As a matter of fact, I had some wonderful black kids in my class. I was in the rapid class. They were very bright. Later on, I saw them in college, at City College, and they were friends. But there was an element that always was looking for trouble, and they had gangs and all that kind of stuff. And the Jewish kids never had gangs. Everybody else had gangs. We never had gangs. One incident came to mind was one day we were went to this movie basically in the black area of the Bronx at that time, Prospect Avenue, but there was still a lot of whites around there. And we were coming home one night on a Saturday night, and we were surrounded. There was like 8 of us, and we were surrounded about 15 or more blackie youngsters, and they started up with us. As well, I think there were six of us. So what happened is that one of the Jewish boys, this black boy threatened him, like he was going to take out a knife from his pocket, and this boy hit him in the mouth, and he fell back. And at that point, one of our friends said, "Let's run for it." So they all started to run down the hill from Prospect Avenue. We had to run about 2 blocks, and then
Didn't one of your friends hit one of the kids?
Yes, I just mentioned that he hit one of the kids in the mouth, and this kid fell back. And at that point, one of our boys said, "Let's run for it," and they all started to run, except my friend George, who started to run, and I was running next to him sideways, because he was very, very slow. George had a big problem, but he was very slow. He was also later on, he had been in the hospital because he was a schizophrenic, and he had been in Lubbock, Texas, where he was in a hospital for about a year or 2 for treatment for schizophrenia. And we started to run, and I was the only one. I wouldn't leave George, so I just kept trotting out next to him, and every few, went about 10, 20 yards, and then I would stop and I would charge them, all these black kids running after us. And they would all stop, and they would all go, momentarily stop, and then I jumped forward, and I was catching up to George again. And I tried to work him down to the bottom of that hill so that we would be in our neighborhood. But at that point, there was a park, and he had to go around the park, and George ran out of steam. He couldn't run anymore. And he started to take off his jacket. And while this was going on, one of the black kids came from the other side with a big broomstick and hit him over the head. And George fell down with his head bleeding. And I charged these black kids again, and again they all ran back. And then I was hollering out, and people started to open their windows. And finally and when the black kids heard all the people screaming from the apartment houses, So they all ran away, ran back up to Prospect Avenue. And I got George, I picked him up and I carried him over to the park bench and I laid him down. And then we waited and somebody called the ambulance. And I ended up taking him to Lincoln Hospital. And I stayed with him all night, and then they kept him overnight, so then I came home. Because I was far away from home, but I walked home from down there. And this was a troubling night, and it was just sad that the other boys, because we were around 18 years old, these kids were like 15, 16, these black kids, and instead of fighting them right then and there, they all decided they ran away. And when I confronted them the next day why they ran away on us, they said, oh, they ran home to get help. Help, nothing, nobody ever came to help. It was in the middle of the night. It was like 12 o'clock in the middle of the night. Who's around to help? Well, anyhow, that's what it was. That was one incident.
But from that you decided, that you couldn't rely on any of these kids. Were you one to back away from a fight?
No, I wouldn't go back. I wouldn't run away from a fight and leave any of my friends there. No way. Well, that's not my way. I wasn't raised like that. My brother either. My brother Al was always tough, and we had this toughness for my dad, because my dad told stories that when he was a kid in Europe, and how these guys would gang up on him, and my father was named properly. My father's name was Yehuda. Aryeh, he was a little lion. He was a tough. My dad was short. He was like 180 pounds solid. But he wasn't big. He was like 5'4", but he was on 4. He was a solid man. And my brother was built like that also. I'm not built like that, although I'm broad-shouldered. But they had a strong. Entire body was very strongly built. So this was not our way. But and especially when you came out of Europe, you always were confronted. So you always had to, fight in a way. Although I was very young, but I grew up with that mentality.
Now you told another story about you needed a tie for assembly.
Oh yeah, another incident was one day I came out of junior high school 40 again, and I was walking down
But tell the backstory about how you needed to get it, but you didn't have the money.
Oh yeah, we came to America in 1939, and my dad put me to sign me up for the first grade, and then they promoted me the next season to the second half of the. I was only 1 month in 1A, and then they put me to 1B, and then I started the second grade by September. But I didn't know any English. I couldn't speak any English. And the teacher used to come. Her name was Mrs. Bimstone, I remember, a nice Jewish lady. So she used to I knew that every once a week there was assembly, but all the classes went down to assembly and they raised the flag. They did Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. What happened is that I didn't have they all had they had to wear a white shirt, either a blue tie or a red tie with it. That was everybody had to wear that. Anyhow, she used to come to me. I had no tie. I don't know if I had a white shirt. Maybe I had a white shirt, but I didn't have a tie. And then she would show me I need to buy a tie, and she would go through the whole routine with her hands on my neck, around my neck, how I had to put the tie. And I would nod and nod my head, and went home. I never told my parents because we had no money. And a few cents we had, we're not going to waste it on a necktie. If we had a few cents, we went and bought some food. So anyhow, This went on for quite a while. Finally, I couldn't stall anymore, and I thought this. And I went to my aunt, Paula Naney, and her husband Farkas. Their name was Paula and Farkas Greenstein. So I told them what was going on.
Who were they?
They were the people that we stayed with when we came to America. They put us up for 2 weeks and got us the apartment where we lived. And for me to get a good meal, my mother always sent me over to their house because she knew they would feed me. I was a scrawny little kid. What happened is that it seems that I told them the story because next thing I know, their daughter went and bought me a nice red knitted tie, about in the 5 and 10, but it was good enough. So I had this tie, and I had it for a number of years because this was when I started. This was in the grade school. Now I'm in junior high school, and I still have this tie. So I'm wearing the tie that there must have been assembly, and I was walking home down the hill, and coming up the hill was like a 17, 18-year-old black kid, and in his hand he had a chain, a metal chain that he was swinging, and I was walking down there with my books. I'm like 12 years old, and he stops me and he says to me, "Give me your tie, boy." So what could what am I doing? He got me there, and he's swinging this chain, and I didn't want to get hit with that metal chain. So he took the tie off me, and he took my tie. So that was the end of my story with my red tie. So I guess by that time we could afford to buy a tie, but it was that tie for a number of years. I always used it for assembly. That was another incident that I had in school. A third incident in school was winter time, and this was also in 40. This is that 50-50, 60-40 ratio. So what happened was all of a sudden we're coming out of the schoolyard, and it was winter time, and it must have been close to Christmas time, because all of a sudden the line got very slow between the first and second floors. And before I know it, I didn't know nobody knew what was going on. And kids were talking, and all of a sudden we got to the top of the stair between the landings, and there were about 3 big black kids, about 17, 18 years old, with big burlap bags. Big burlap bags were used for flour or beans, whatever, in the grocery stores. They had these big bags, and every time the next kid came up, they would take earmuffs, ties, pencils, gloves, whatever they got, put it into the burlap. I guess they were getting ready for Santa Claus. And then they let you go, and you went up to your room, and there was no one to complain to. And I guess when they got grabbed enough, they ran downstairs, and they ran away with all this, whatever they could get from these kids. So that was another incident. A third incident we had was, again, in the same school. One day, the lined us up at lunchtime. We were all lined up to go back up to our class. And these detectives were running up and down the line looking at all the kids, and they were coming our line. Our line was all nice, mostly Jewish kids on line. We were a rapid class, smart class kids, and we didn't know from Chachmas, we didn't know from these things. All of a sudden, what are they looking for? They're looking for some guys. They raped the Spanish teacher at lunchtime. So this is why we had all the kids in the school, 16, 17, 18-year-olds who were still in junior high school, with 12-year-olds. It was really a problem, and this is what we were faced with. So that's just another incident.
You told the story about
the subway.
Oh, you tell the subway. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So then one day, now my children were already out of the house. 2 of them were married, and my younger son David was in California. Arthur and Carol had been married already. So anyway, I was working tax season, and I was going down. I was working for for these two brothers in the CPA firm, the Zabransky brothers. I was doing tax work. After I finished with the housing authority, during the day I worked for them, and after 5 o'clock I ate outside lunch, dinner, and then I went to this was summertime, because my grandma, my wife Louise, she was up in Putnam Lake with her mother. So this was during the week. So I left. Must have been like July already, June, July, and I left work and I was going down into the subway, 42nd Street. I worked on 39th and 7th Avenue. So I walked to 42nd Street, Times Square, and I was walking down, and I paid my money to go through the turnstile. And as I was going through, a bunch of about 15 black youngsters were coming through the other way. And one of them would come right by me, coming out of the turnstile, and he took a swing at me, and I saw them punch coming, was lucky, and I ducked, and he just caught me there, just the tip of my face. Oh, I was so angry, I turned around and I was ready to run out, and they were all lined up waiting, and they got their hands in their pockets like they got knives, whatever, and this fellow who gave out the tokens in the booth person. So a black man, he says to me, he says, don't go out, stay. He hollered out to me. He says, leave them, let them go. He says, you have more problems. So so then I just went on the train and I went home. But it was bothering me that I couldn't get that kid, even with that kid. Oh, that bothered me. Anyhow, these are some of the stories that I had encountered.
What you also told a story about how you used to with the bags. You used to sell bags.
Oh, when it was my first job. I was like 10 years old, and we lived on our house where we lived in the apartment building was on the bottom of a market. And the market ran like 2 blocks up from Fox Street all the way down to Kelly Street. In between was Tiffany Street. And both sides of the street were all kinds of stands, fruit stands, vegetables. They had kosher butcher stores, they had all kinds of stores. And what happened was, I used to do is, I figured out, I was like 10 years old, that if I got like a nickel for my mother, and I went to this paper store, which was like 1 block down from us, and paper goods, he sold paper goods, and I bought shopping bags. I paid a penny for a shopping bag. And then I took the shopping bag, and I used to go up and down the market and see when there was a lady there who was carrying, that she purchased stuff in her arm. I would try and sell a bag, so I would sell the paper bag for 2 cents. So I'm a big entrepreneur. As a kid, I started that. Then I used to help another man. Used to stop by. He was unloading bananas. Now these bananas were pretty big stalks. I don't know if anyone saw a stalk of banana. It was quite a number on a branch, and he used to give me a quarter. I used to help him unload the bananas from his truck. That was another little job I had. My brother also worked. He worked all night on a Saturday night in the summertime for this fruit stand, fruit and vegetable stand. And the man, he would be there because they were open. We were open till 1 o'clock in the morning. It was very safe. The neighborhood was nice. And the man would give him he paid him for all night's work $1.50, something like that. And then the next morning, my brother was a big avid Brooklyn Dodger fan. And the next morning, my mother would would make us 2 big thermos bottles of chocolate milk, and then she would make us sandwiches and fruits, whatever. And then my brother would take me to Brooklyn on the train. I was 4.5 years younger than he was, and he would take me to Abbotsfield with him to watch the Brooklyn Dodgers play. 1941, the Dodgers won the pennant that year. They had a great team. And that year he also took me, and I saw that Cincinnati Reds were playing. It was a big doubleheader, huge doubleheader. If you look up in the baseball record books, and there was the 4 top pitchers in the National League at that time. The Dodgers had Whitlow Wyatt and Kirby Higbee, and Cincinnati had Bucky Walters and Johnny Vandermeer. So this was a big doubleheader, huge. And Wyatt won the first game for the Dodgers, and Vandermeer won the second game for the Cincinnati Reds. It was a great game. I remember that.
Were you at the famous game where, was it the Brooklyn Dodgers who won the World Series against the Yankees? There was a very famous...
Yeah, that was later on. That was in the 50s already, I think.
Is it the shot heard around the world or something?
No, that was, the Dodgers lost the, that was like a calamity. The last game of the season, and the Brooklyn Dodgers were playing the New York Giants. They were like enemies. You know, this was a real a tough game. And then what happened was the Dodgers brought in their relief pitcher. It was very late in the 9th inning. The Giants had two players, I think, on base. It was in the Polo Grounds where the Giants played in Manhattan, the Polo Grounds. And what happened is that they brought in this, he took out the pitcher and they brought in his relief pitcher. His name was Branca, Ralph Branca. And Thomas was up for the Giants. He was the hitter for the Giants. And this guy hit a 3-run home run, and the Dodgers lost they lost the game, and they were knocked out of the pennant. They were going to play the Yankees for the World Series, and the whole thing collapsed. And it was like a shocker. The whole country, Brooklyn was in mourning. They raised the flags in half staff.
Well, Alex must have been upset.
Oh, my brother was devastated. I mean, this was terrible.
But weren't they both playing in Brooklyn?
No.
Where was the Polo Grounds?
Polo Grounds was in Manhattan on 55th Street. Just opposite the Yankee Stadium. If you took that bridge, if you went to the right, you went to the stadium. If you went to the left across the Harlem River, you were in the Polo Grounds.
Wow.
So it was a big rivalry. The whole city was a big rivalry. But when it came to that World Series between the Giants or the Yankees or the Dodgers and the Yankees, there was all the Subway Series. It was really, the whole city was up. So...
What did you were also telling how you used to eat when you got here. Because you had no money, did you?
Oh, we had no money. We had a terrible time as a youngster. We had no food. I mean, we lived on real, they talk poverty level. We were below, twice below the poverty level. So what happened was, my mother would wait till 5 o'clock at night, or 6 o'clock, when they were closing all the market was closing down, so she could run down, and the few pennies that we had, she could buy bananas that were there all day already. They were pretty ripe, so we can, so we would have bananas to eat, or she could buy the cheapest thing those days was sardines, to the point where I hated it, or I couldn't even eat. I got allergic to bananas. I hated the sardines, they were so oily. But we had to survive. We were surviving on very small amounts of food. Must have been very hard for my mother, because whatever she could save, she wouldn't starve herself to give to the kids. So this is and she worked very hard, because she did like a cleaning lady on the floors. She had to do the floors in offices and all kinds of things like that.
So did you, when you came home from school, she was still at work probably?
Yes, she could have been. I don't remember that much. Yeah, yes, because somebody let me. I guess so. I had a key, let myself in.
Or maybe Eileen was there.
Yeah. Another job I had. No, Eileen worked. My sister was 16 already at that point. 17, 18. She went downtown. She was working in the making neckties. She worked right away since she was 16 years old. She worked full time. At one time we were very poor at the very beginning, so we were able to get some jewelry. Not jewelry, to make up, what would you call that?
Sequins?
Make up
Necklaces?
necklaces and what do you call that? You can buy them.
Costume jewelry.
Costume jewelry. So sort of how my dad got a lead to that about to get costume jewelry, and he would bring it home, and all of us worked at our table on a Sunday. We all sat around and we made these things up.
How long would you say it was that you were in real poverty?
How long we were there in real poverty? Real poverty was until pretty much in poverty. Well, let me say this, 1941, we finally were able to buy a radio. So 40, 41, because at that point my dad was able to listen to the news, what was going on, because the war was already at its height in Europe. Hitler had already invaded, probably took Paris.
You said 1946, you mean 1941?
41. The war broke out in 39.
So for a couple of years, let's say from 1939 to 1941, you were really struggling.
It was a struggle. It got easier slowly, because my sister was, she was born in 23. So how old was she by 1940? She was like 17 by 1940. So she was working full time. Was 41, she was 18, she was definitely working.
And what was your father doing at this point?
My father at this point was very sick man. He had hernia, he had a double hernia, he had ulcers. And I don't know how much work he could do. He wasn't able to do too much. My mother worked, cleaning houses and doing things like that. That was going on. My brother was probably did odd jobs after school, because he was 16. In 1940 he was bar mitzvah in 38. So he was 15. He did a teenager, whatever he could do. I told you he worked in the market and helped out. I made a few cents there. Then in 1943, he turned 18. He was only in the 6th grade in vocational high school. He went to Gampus High School because he was older, so they started him off already in junior high school, whereas I started off in the grade school. But he was much older. So he got up into high school, and he was learning to be an electrician in the high school. And then he turned 18 in July 27th, 1943, and September 1st he was already in the Coast Guard. He was in boot camp. in the Coast Guard. Now, how he got there was all luck. When he went in down to be inducted into the service, they asked, they lined up all the guys that they accepted, because every state, every city, they all had these recruitment centers, and they were told what they needed. The different branch of the service gave their quota. They need so many Army, the Navy needs so many, the Marines need so many, and my brother was all lined up, wherever they assigned you. So they just call out a name. They say Army, next name goes to the Navy, next guy Air Force, whatever, what they needed. They called my brother's name. They said Coast Guard. They needed a few people in the Coast Guard, so they sent him to Manhattan Beach for boot camp.
Manhattan Beach in Brooklyn?
Yes, that's where he took 13 weeks of training.
There was an armory there?
No, it's not an armory. It was a Coast Guard base. That's where you learned. You learned how to shoot. You learned all kinds of stuff. It was a Coast Guard base, Manhattan Beach.
I don't think it's still there anymore.
Yes.
It is?
Still there, Manhattan Beach. If you took a ride down there to the very end of as a matter of fact, Arthur got married in Manhattan Beach Jewish Center. But if you went a little bit further down on that same street to the very end, there was the the Coast Guard base. So that's why they sent him for training. Army guys went to Fort Dix, Fort Bragg, North Carolina, wherever they needed them. They just gave them the papers, and they gave them to pay. The Army, they took them wherever they needed, these different people. So he just, as a matter of fact, so when finally he finished his 13 weeks, and now they broke boot camp. They only gave you 13 weeks of training, and you're ready to go. Whether you had to learn, if you were in the Army, you had to learn artillery, whatever unit they needed you. That's where they sent you. So he came home that Shabbos with his big sack, all his clothing, everything, because now he had to go. And where was his assignment? At that point, they assigned him to
Louisiana. You had said
no, not yet to Louisiana. First, they sent him to Ellis Island. Ellis Island was a camp, was a Coast Guard base. They turned it into a Coast Guard base. Ellis Island was where all the used to come in,
yep.
The immigrants. But that was turned over. They made it into a U.S. Coast Guard base, and because they needed that base was very important. They needed to protect the harbor. And all these guys, they pulled guard duty. There was Coast Guard people on all the piers, because there were a lot of Nazis in the Nazi sympathizers in New York. A lot of German Bunds. The Bund was very strong in New York. I don't know if people are aware of that, but the Bund, they used to, the Yaphank, New York, was a big base. They used to go, these Nazis used to go and train there. And a lot of these spies came in from Germany, and they used to go there, and they used to meet there. There's a whole movie on that, how they caught these spies that worked for the Nazis. And they were afraid. As a matter of fact, there were 11, I believe, there were 11 Nazis that they tried to bring in on U-boats.
Yeah.
And this was all in New York, in New Jersey. They caught them. The Coast Guard caught them. So there was that. It sounded like a very easy thing, but they had to be on the ball.
Right.
Had to be careful,
Well, and there were a lot of merchant ships that were shot by U-boats off the eastern seaboard.
A lot of them lost. We lost so many some merchant Marines got killed, because these guys were taking supplies over to England, and helping the Allies out there, and we were not. They were not. What do you call it? Had no protection. It wasn't until 1941 that the United States went into the war, and we didn't have much. We lost most of our fleet. If everybody remembers it, Pearl Harbor. That's where all our power was. Our naval power was in Pearl Harbor, not on the Atlantic Ocean. So they had to really build the whole Navy for the Atlantic, and they had to build the whole Navy for the Pacific. It was a big effort. That's where my dad finally got himself. He went that night to Campus High School. Now my dad at that time was in his 50s. They sent him to. He signed up. He wanted the job, so he sent him to Campus High School, which was a vocational high school, and they taught him how to work with metal. He became a machinist. And then when he finished, then he got a job in a plant to build whatever they were building for the war effort.
So probably during the war, all of a sudden you had much more money than you ever had, because Alex was sending his money home probably. He didn't need it, right? Because he was living on a base. And your father was working.
I think he said no. They my wife, like Louise's brother, he sent allotment checks to his mother when he was in the service. But this was much later on, and of course, Grandma Louise's dad had already died, so the mother was a widow. So he was able to send allotment checks to her to help her. My father was alive, so so I don't know if my brother did that, but you didn't really get too much money. You got like $54 a month, so you didn't have too much. And if you went to the PX store, they called it. Every base had a PX where they had, guys used to buy stuff for themselves, cigarettes, chocolates, and clothing, whatever. He could have said, I don't remember. Gee, and I don't know if my sister would remember that. But if he signed up for that. But anyhow, he was assigned there, and at one point, they decided that they needed more help in another part of the country. So they took my brother, probably 1944, sometimes 44 or 40, maybe early 45, and they sent him to the Coast Guard base in Baton Rouge, New Louisiana, which is a little right outside New Orleans, because that's where he had to he did all the piers whatever in New Orleans, that the whole Louisiana basin. So they had to protect that part. Maybe there were problems from the Caribbean.
Yeah. Now you had mentioned last time that he was in Baton Rouge.
Yeah, he was in Baton Rouge, and that's where while he was serving there, it was almost the end of the war. The war was just another month or two finished, and it would have been over. And that's when my dad passed away. March 3rd, 1946. It was on Rosh Chodesh Adar base. It was a leap year, for the second Adar. So
when is your site if there's no other base?
There's only one Adar, that's it.
So you do it at the end of the...
First day of Rosh Chodesh Adar. Adar always has 2 days of Rosh Chodesh. The first day of Adar is not Adar, it's the last day of the previous month. But we died on the first day of Adar.
Adar base.
Adar base. Or Adar Sheni, if there's or Adar Rishon, if there's only one. That's the rule. However, the rule goes the other way. If somebody dies on Adar Rishon, then they have to observe both Adars.
Oh, interesting. Now you were you'd mentioned some people along the way when we were talking the other day. You was somebody named Reuben Camille. You had some stories about him.
Oh yeah, Reuben came into our life when we moved and left the East Bronx. I moved, from Kelly Street. So we moved further east, near where I went to high school, basically. Although I was already working. It's called Harrod Avenue. It was the Soundview station on the Pelham Bay local Lexington Avenue line. And we moved there in that area, and there I met these guys, a bunch of guys over there, my age, a couple of years maybe older, some maybe younger, and I became friendly with them, and one through the other. One guy that I met in shul, and he knew these other guys, so I got to know a whole bunch of them. And this is the group that I went with, that I met Grandma Louise, because they decided to go social dancing, and signed up at Taft High School, had this for adult education program at night. So anyhow, one of the fellas in that group was Reuben Camille. And Reuben Camille was going with somebody, with a young woman that he met, and I met Grandma Louise at the high school, and then, but because we started to double date together at one point, and then Reuben Camille was a CPA, a very bright man, and at one point they decided he got married before we did, but so they moved to Israel. He was very Zionistic. But then he had trouble with the language, and within a year he was very unhappy. He came back. They came back. And we were there with them again. We were friendly. And
he got you some jobs, right?
So he's the one. He was a CPA, and he knew he worked for these brothers called the Zabransky brothers. It was a Shomer Shabbos accounting firm, which was good because I had a job with the New York City Housing Authority, but he got me a job working for them from Sunday and at night during tax season, which was perfect because I needed the extra money. We had young children. I don't know if all of them were, but probably they were all already born. Carol, Arthur, and David. So I worked at night after school, after work at 5 o'clock. I would go there, work, and come home late at night. And I did this all tax season, and then I did this on Sundays because they didn't work Saturday, which was perfect for me. And they didn't. It was good for them that they got somebody to work on Sunday. So I worked Sunday for them. So that was Reuben Camille's role.
Were they paying you better than the housing authority was?
No, I was paying. It wasn't that they were paying me more. They were paying me an hourly, whatever. I didn't have to produce X number of not forms.
Hours or whatever.
Your tax returns. I didn't have to do X number. They gave me, some returns were easy, you knock it off quickly. Some were complicated. When there were no returns to be done, I would do write-ups. So a guy had a little company of his own. He has his own business, and he had all these paperwork. So then I would go and get all these paperwork together and go through all the bills and write up the bills, set up schedules for accounts payable, receivable, and eventually work out to see what kind of income he had. And that income we used for the tax return. He paid tax on that or got money back for that, whatever. So that's that work. But I did all kinds of tax work. Some of them were small businesses, some were companies. I ended up doing 1120 forms, which are corporation forms. And it was very interesting. I remember doing one old lady, I couldn't believe this. This woman was 85 years old. This woman had $45,000 worth of dividends a year. And I had pages and pages of companies and how much each paid, because you had to list everything and you had to send it in part of the return. I couldn't believe 45,000 worth of just interest, just dividends. Then she had interest from bank. So her husband must have had a good...
had a lot of money.
Made a lot of money.
Now, we were talking also about how you used to play with the kids in the Bronx.
Oh yeah, we want to get there. But before that, I also wanted to. I did other little odds and end jobs. Excuse me. On the side, at one point I even did. I was a fuller brush man. Selling fuller brush equipment to people. And my wife, she used to sell Avon products, so we did that a little bit together. Once we were married, at one point in our life, we were into our own business, because Grandma Louise, she worked in a, well, she'll tell her story about the type of job she had, and they used to give away dishes in theaters. And she'll explain it in detail. But I used to do is also, so that but we got ourselves 2 or 3 theaters that we were providing dishes for, and these theaters would give out these dishes, and we made a few cents on each dish that was given away. And we had a company from Japan that gave us the supplies. And one theater, there was a theater we had in Jersey, I believe. We had one in New York. And then we had one theater, it was the Princess Theater in New Haven, Connecticut. Now she happened to know all these managers in these companies, in these movie theaters. So we were able to get in, had a foot in the door, and able to get the contract for a year with them. So we did that also. So I did little things here and there, to make a few extra dollars.
But you guys were always working, pretty much.
Always working. We always try to work, And I think our children are like that, because they all, nobody was a slacker. Work was part of our makeup. It wasn't you get a freebie for nothing. You just don't get a freebie. We're not a freebie people. We've always felt that we worked for what we earned for what we got. Now you talk about the children. When the children were little, that was a great time. When Friday night was our night, and Friday night was my night to spend with the kids, and we had such great fun. We used to play hide and seek, but it wasn't a simple hide and seek. But whoever was in had to count, but they couldn't just count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 10 and say anyone around my base is it. No, they had to either count in Romanian or in Hungarian. So nobody counted 1, 2, 3, 4 to 10. So you had all these little kids with their little American accents, standing against the wall with their heads against the wall, and they're counting in Romanian, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. or etiquette I don't know, you thought hate no skill and steez. That was so funny. And then we all hid and then we would look for each other, whoever was it. So that was one part of fun. And then another thing, they were very young, so they would hide. Then I would go around, if I was it, I would look for them, and I said, I wonder where the kids are, and I wonder where, and Grandma would get the kids out from where they were hiding, and they would stand behind me, like about a foot behind me, all lined up size places, right? And then I would start, and of course I knew they were right there behind me, so I would start walk around the living room. I started like in a little circle, and I would sing 1, 2, 3. I wonder where they are, and we would sing, and we'd do the conga line. It was like a conga, was like a dance, and we'd go around, and every once in a while, and they would follow me right after me and laugh and quietly, like I didn't know they were. And all of a sudden I would stop, and they always come bumping into me because I stopped suddenly, and then there was a little laughter behind me. So that this could go on for an hour or two. And then so this one on Friday was great night. And then when I was ready to go to sleep, they all got in their pajamas, and now they all came into our bed. Now they were in our bed, and what happened was, but I didn't go into the bed. This was Grandma's turn to get into the bed. And she got on the bed, and she would start with the closest one to her, and she goes, steamroller, steamroller. And she started, Grandma wasn't, she was zaftig, she wasn't exactly 100 pounds, and she would roll over on the little kids, and she would roll from one to the other one. She would roll the holes under the two beds, and then she would roll back, and they would laugh, and they would go. And so there was a steamroller. Friday night was a steamroller night. And then Arthur was easy to hide because he was very flexible. She would put him on top of a closet. She got up there. Or she would put him behind the curtain on the windowsill. And I would go around looking, where is he? But it was so much fun. That was fun. And then we got a little older now, they were sophisticated. So we got to the point where now we can have a clubhouse meeting, right? So we would take pillows from our sofas, the big large pillows, and we would make a little house, built a little house against the wall or whatever. And then we would all crawl into the little house. Of course, I didn't have my foot outside the house, but they were all in the house. And then we had each week we had a different, somebody was assigned to be the president, one was the vice president, one was the secretary, and they would ask them to read the minutes, they had to say the minutes, and then we do the whole to-do, and we had do that fun. We had so much fun under there. And this went on for hours. After we had dinner, we did this. Of course, we sang Zemirot, and we had a lot of fun at the table. Oh, and I used to put the kids, I used to have throw, that was fun. We did Tzur Mishalo Ochanu. So I would have, the older one was on one leg, which was Carol, and then I had Arthur and on the other leg, and David in front of Arthur, because he was the smallest. And I would have all three, and I would sing, and then I would lift up my both legs at the same time. I would say, Tzor, 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 Michelle, they were singing, we were going, we had a good time. The greatest fun was one particular night, was in Putnam Lake. So we were in the kitchen, and we were doing this, and Putnam Lake, the light switch in the kitchen was a light, but they had a long string hanging down. So you had to pull the string to put the light on or pull the light off. And Grandma Louise, she was into this, and we were all singing and we were doing this. Tzur, and you picture this, and Grandma's there now, she's carried away, she's overwhelmed with this thing, right? And she has the towel from the hand towel, right? And she's twirled it around and she's swinging it around. So the towel wrapped itself around the kitchen. the string. And next thing you know, when she pulled and the whole light went out. Oh man, that was wild. That was a big little joke for a long time. So that was fun. But that was our fun time, Friday nights.
We used to also take walks in the Bronx, I remember, after Shabbos. When Shabbos started, if Shabbos started early, we used to go out for family walks. You may not remember that.
Yeah, I'm sure, probably.
And we used to do trick or treat back then in the Bronx on Halloween.
Well, Halloween wasn't, it was a, what do you call it, it was a Goyish holiday, but there were a lot of kids, hundreds of little kids all over the place. And we lived in the project, and it was you had 6 stories to go up and down in and knock on people's doors. And they would go, the kids would go, our kids would go with other kids, and they would just go and do this stuff. Yeah, that was what trick-or-treating was fun. Purim, we used to have in the shul, was very far out Purim, and Mom would put things on the children, make them, dress them up for Purim. We used to do that kind of stuff. Oh yeah, and then when I got older, we used to take them to houses, and they would knock off for Purim, for treat, and they bring the shalach manot, and they would make a few dollars. They would get something from each house, something. That was fun also. That was a good time. So basically, we had a good year. The kids had a good youth. Wasn't fancy, but was fun.
Who did you have any friends in particular when you lived in the Bronx? At the shul?
Oh yeah, we always had friends. We had the Seabrow family. There were like 3, 4 brothers. So we were friendly. They were always invited. They had they had their own business, so they were always making something, doing something. Then there was the one boy who was Arthur's class. What was the name? The 2 brothers.
Steinmetz?
Not Steinmetz was already older. Their boys were older. What was the name? Oh my! They had the father. The old man was with them.
I don't remember.
Grandfather.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah. Anyhow, so they. We read things.
Do you remember the time the dog walked into shul?
No, I don't remember. A dog walked into shul?
Oh, all right, I'll tell you that afterwards.
Okay. I don't remember that.
Who were your friends like from work that you kept in touch with?
Oh, my friends from work was Herbie Mallon. Herbie Mallon was my age. We worked together in the housing authority. We became friendly. I was at his wedding, and I remember going to his oldest son's birth, and he had a bris, a younger son, and I went to the younger son's wedding. Younger son got married while he was a lieutenant in the service. He was an officer in the army. Then he was stationed in Italy, and.
Is he alive still, Herbie? Now?
Oh yeah, no, Herbie died. He died many years, number of years.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he died. I was at the funeral where he went. I was a friend with Herbie Fine, another fellow I worked with. He lives here somewhere. And then these were, Malins were really the closest to us, because they also, we were friends, as well, Grandma still writes to them, to her.
So Lois was her name, right?
Lois, right. Lois, so I remember his mother. It was interesting.
What about Louis Presser?
Louis Presser worked with me, yes. Louis Presser was working with me. As well, we were very friendly with them while his wife was still alive here. And she died, and then it was, it's a different ballgame. While you're married, so you have something to do in common, and then it was.
What about Pesach? Did we ever used to have to buy wine?
Oh, yeah, I had a friend, the Moshe Mandel. The Mandels lived on Kelly Street. His father had a big beard, and his father had a sofa store. He used to sell religious articles, right a couple of, the next building or from our building. And so I used to do his tax return, my friend Moshe Mandel's tax return. And so I didn't charge him, but he always gave us wine. So we used to bring in a couple of cartons of wine. So we had wine for Passover. As a matter of fact, the last time he passed away also. The last time he did this, I lived already somewhere, Long Beach, and he brought it over to Arthur, or Arthur took it. So Arthur gave me whatever wine I won't need it. And so
he used to bring a lot of wine.
He was bringing a lot of wine. Yeah, it was heavy. There were 2 or 3 of those
cases. Yeah.
Yeah. So
was he in the wine business?
No. He just got it from his shul.
Oh.
He probably paid the shul a check. He took it off the tax, and then he gave me some wine. That was good. I still see his wife. We were still going to Black and Hexter to the camp with his wife. Every season we used to see his wife. But this year it broke up. So I didn't see her. I don't know where she is now. Sidell had a bakery store on Franklin Street here in Queens, in Corona. It was all Goyim in the neighborhood. So basically they had they catered to the Goyish element with the bakery.
What was Putnam Lake like to you? What did you like to do most up there?
Well, Putnam Lake.
What were your chores like? What was life like for you at Putnam Lake?
Well, Putnam Lake, we had a good time. Saturday night in Putnam Lake was fun night for the older people, because we used to go down to the shul, and there we used to play. We used to play penny or two poker. The women used to play their games. The men used to play high and low. We used to call the game. It was fun. Called high and low. Whoever had the highest pair, they won, and whoever had the lowest, the least, they won. So the secret was, if you had a lousy hand, to make it lousier, and we had a good hand to build on it. So that was a fun game. We had a lot of fun. Then we used to have, because I became the president of the Putnam Lake Jewish Center. I was also the spiritual leader after a while, because all the older guys died. So I was like the only one left who knew anything.
Knew Hebrew.
Yeah, so I became the spiritual leader, but that's fun. They had a lot of respect for me, and we had nice times in the shul. The ladies would have cake bakes in the summertime, and the guy used to come and buy the cakes. So that was one of the fundraisers. that they did.
Because it did the break after Yom Kippur. We used to break.
Yeah, oh yeah, we used to break fast on after Yom Kippur over there.
What was it you didn't want to talk about?
So anyhow, they used to buy all the food necessary for the break, and that was our the end of the season. Once we finished with that, we cleaned up, and then the shul, I took the Torahs and took them, and put them, take them into New York for those, and we closed the shul down basically. That was Yom Kippur was the last thing.
And you used to go home during the week and leave us up there, right?
Oh well, summertime was great for the kids. Summertime was ideal place to go. Unless they were older, they can go to camp. But when they were young, it was perfect. They all learned how to swim there. I suppose, all right? Did you learn how to swim
Yeah,
there?
I'm sure I learned to swim there.
Yeah. In fact, you did learn how to swim there. My son, I'm talking to my son David here. He was the youngest, and reason I know he knew how to swim is because we came back one season, came home, the season was over, and all of a sudden the Young Israel movement had a program for swimming program for the youngsters. All the young Israels can send in their kids over there for this races they set up. So
This is a terrible story.
no,
I'm still scarred by it.
this story is this story made me very upset. I felt bad because this is how I'll tell the story. What happened was I had my older boy Arthur and his brother David. Then they were there, and I signed them up. And naturally, Arthur swam and probably got his medal because he was a top swimmer from Putnam Lake. He was older. And then David, he was like maybe 6 years old.
I think I was older, maybe even 8.
No, maybe 8, okay. But he wasn't that top swimmer at 8 yet. Not.
No.
But he knew how to swim. So so the fellow running this program, he had a son the same age as David.
What was his name? Do you remember?
I just was on the tip of my tongue and I can't remember his name. And he was running the program for the Young Israel movement. And they had this nice pool in Manhattan that they were utilizing for these races. So we were members of the Young Israel of Pelham Parkway. So, right?
Irwin
Irwin.
was the name of the father. The last name was Irwin.
Irwin.
I'll think of the kid's name.
Yeah.
It's burned in my memory.
Yeah. So what happened? So now this is the big race. So the two people left that age in that group to swim for the races. One was David, and this fellow who's running the program, his son, right? His son couldn't swim. He couldn't know him, but he's running and he's in the swim. So what was the race? It was not the length of the pool. It was the width of the pool. Had to swim across the river. So that's what we're honest people, right? So the kids are in the pool, and their father's ready, get set, go, and they go. And my son David, he starts swimming, and he's knocking himself out, and he's swimming and stroking and gonna go. And this other kid can't swim. Yeah? All he did was walk. He's walking across the pool. And he got there before David got there swimming. And he gives the kid the medal. Oh man, I was so angry. I said, how could you do that? I said, the kid's swimming, he's supposed to swim. He said, yeah, but he had to give his son the medal. So, I'll tell you.
Steve Irwin was the father, I think.
Steve Irwin?
Yeah, I think he was the president of the National Council or something like that.
Yeah. You know who I still see? I daven with in the mornings? His name is Irving Freireich. You don't remember Irving
I
Fry?
remember the name.
Fry Rex, we lived in Astor Gardens, and he was there. He was, in fact, I put insurance through. He was an insurance guy for our house on Fenton Avenue. I used Irving. So I still see him in the morning. We talk. That was in Nussex Fard on Main Street.
Do you remember the trips to the drive-in?
Oh, the drive-in was fun. We had so much fun in the drive-in. In the summertime, we used to go for the driving. And what happens at driving is that Mom, my wife would put all the kids in their pajamas. They would put all the kids into their pajamas, and now we went to the driving theater in Danbury, the Danbury Drive-In Theater. And they were all, whatever, so before the movie started, it was a little early, so all the kids were out from all the cars. The place was loaded with kids, and they had a whole big play area for the kids with swings and all kinds of stuff going on. And they had a lot of fun out there, and then it got dark enough for the movie to start. And all the kids ran into the cars, and they're watching the movies, and the movie went at halftime. Now it's business time for the movie. So they stopped the movie, and every kids ran out, and they had ice cream. They bought ice cream and popcorn and peanuts, whatever they were doing. And then that phase ended, everybody ran back in the car, watched the rest of the movie, which probably ended around 11, and everybody was asleep, all the kids were asleep. Or the younger ones were asleep already. So we had a lot of fun. We used to go every week. Well, I was on vacation, but I didn't stay there all the time up there. Sometimes I used to I used to commute. There was times when I commuted from the city, but not often. I commuted from the city when I had to leave the car for Mom, for my wife, because she needed the car. Sometimes the kids had to be taken somewhere, do something. So I left the car. So but we used to do that. And then Mom tells the story. She may tell the story because she did it. Something to the effect that she had all the kids up there, and she went to take them to see Jaws or one of these very horror movies. And as a matter of fact, Michelle, our daughter, Jacqueline's daughter, Michelle was up there also. So she took all the kids to the movies. And she saw this, and everybody was scared stiff because this movie was a real horror movie. So she wanted to break the ice with them. So she says, what did she do? On the way home from Danbury, she stopped off at where the A&P store was, if you remember. It was a big parking lot. And she took the parking lot, and then she let each kid get on and let them drive the car.
I remember driving the car.
You do?
I also remember that I wouldn't go in the lake that entire summer.
Why?
Jaws.
Oh, Jaws.
I was scared to death to go in that water.
Oh, my God.
We were too young to see Jaws.
Yeah, well,
I wouldn't go in the lake the entire summer.
Oh, my God. I didn't know
And
that.
I remember telling her, no, I'm not in the mood to swim. I just don't feel like swimming. But I was afraid because of the movie.
Yeah, well, it's funny because the biggest fish in that movie was maybe 6 inches. The biggest fish in that lake.
Yes.
So,
What was the story? Because we're way past it, but I just remembered it about you and Mommy with a swimming competition, where you had a race.
oh, this was very interesting. We were up in this Scaroon Manor, this hotel, and what happened was that she was a top swimmer, and she was in some races over there. I wasn't paying too much attention because swimming wasn't my thing. Swimming was only my thing as far as my favorite part of swimming was laying on my back and floating. But I could swim. I was a swimmer, but I just wasn't into caring that much about it. What happened is that at one point she finished swimming and was sitting around and everything. So I said to her, "Come on," I said, "I have you a race to the raft." There was a raft out there on the lake. So she says, "Okay." So we were young, so we sat, and sure enough, I beat her out to the raft. I was young and strong, so I beat her to the raft, and then I started to tease her. I told her that, and she never lived it down. Wherever I could tell somebody, I told her about how I beat her in swimming, and she's a big champion swimmer. So that was good. But I'll tell you two great stories about swimming. How things changed in my life as far as swimming is concerned. One change was still. I think my son Arthur was in Israel, or he was working in a camp as a lifeguard, and our son David was about 11 years old or so, maybe 12, 11. He was with us, and we went on vacation, so we took him to Cape Cod with us. You remember Cape Cod with the
rotaries?
With the rotary.
The rotary.
Yeah. So we went on over there. The rotary is that everything, whenever roads came together, like from all sides, there was like a circle. So you had to go around this rotary.
It's a traffic circle, but they call them rotaries.
So what happened is that we were in this pool, and I said to David and I were swimming around together, and I said, so we'll have a race across the width of the pool. So anyhow, my big thing was that I was still able to beat him to the width of the pool. Okay? So now, a few years later, what's going on is that Arthur, my son Arthur, came back from Israel. He had been there. He graduated, I think, high school or something. He went to Israel, and so he came back, and he was like 17 years old. So we were in Putnam Lake. I don't know where you were that day. You could have been there with us, but you were not involved at this one point. I was swimming around, floating around in the lake, and Arthur came in, and so I said to Arthur said to me, "Dad, I'll race you to the raft." That was a big thing, to race to the raft, which is maybe, I don't know, 30 yards away, 20 yards.
Yeah, about 50 feet the most.
Yeah, short distance, it wasn't far. Okay, so now my son, not a problem. So we started all ready, said go, and I'm swimming away. I said, oh boy, I'm going. And at one point I pick up my head and I look back and I don't see him. And then I look forward and he's sitting on the raft. I felt like such an idiot. That was the end. Once my son, he's sitting on the raft, and I'm still like another 4 or 5 yards away from the raft. I can't believe it. That was fun.
So what kind of cars were you driving through all these eras? You started with the Studebaker.
Well, the Studebaker was my first car that I had. The front looked like the back, and the back looked like the front, the old Studebaker.
What year was it?
1950 car, maybe.
Stick shift? All of them were stick shifts.
Yeah, it was a stick shift car. Or partially stick shift. The stick shift wasn't on the floor. It was on
The three on the tree.
it was on the handle,
Yeah.
on the handle. That's when I started to go out with my wife, Louise. I had the Studebaker, and all it ever did was break down, and she told us she'll tell the story how the car would break down, and she was so happy. She was happy when I showed up without the car. Anyhow, that was the old Studebaker. And then the next car, I didn't have another car until we got married. And in 1962, we were married, and we needed a car because my wife was pregnant, and we needed a car to go to the doctor.
Was the Studebaker still running at that point? Or you didn't have a car?
I don't remember how I got rid of it. I just don't remember. And I even took it up to Putnam Lake. It was a great downhill car. That was the joke comes in. That was a great downhill. I'm going up that hill just before the Putnam Lake turn in. It was a hill, and then you had to go down the hill. Then you got to Putnam Lake Road. So, I think I remember when you guys were little, and we used to drive up to the lake, and we came to our famous fort, and the fort was in
Goldensbridge.
Goldensbridge. This was this big. It was like a silo, and the big story was that this was an Indian fort, and the Indian fort was how I used to fight the Indians. And we were driving by this thing. I used to fight the Indians, and we had to get by the fort fast.
You used to tell elaborate stories about fighting those Indians with George Washington or something. You used to tell elaborate stories about how you used to fight the Indians.
So anyhow, we used to. Sometimes you had to get past the place, so we decided to. Had to swim because on the other side of it was the water, the little river. So we had to swim behind it and came up the shore and climbed up on top of the fort. And you guys were fascinated. And then once we turned, when we got past there, we knew we were safe. We got past the Indian fort. And then we made the turn into Putnam Lake Road, and then of course we sang the famous song. Botsi, botsi, tarka, shafula, shafarka. That was that cows was the farms. That cows there. Botsi is a young little cow, a baby cow. It's a botsi. So the song is in Hungarian, botsi, botsi, tarka. I learned this as a kid when I was a kid. A little brown cow, had no ears, and had no tail yet.
So is that what Butsi Butsi Tarka Shefula Shefarka?
Shefula Shefarka. Farka is the tail, Fila is the ear. Butsi Butsi Tarka. A little.
So She means no?
Shefula. She means no. Without She. Was it the Shefarka? I forget the rest of it. Anyhow, so we used to sing this as we go by, and you saw the cows, everybody busting to Botsi Botsi Tarka, Anyhow, so we got we had another fort in Putnam Lake. We had another big fort that we had to get around. It was Scalari's. It was like a big, looked like a fort, the building. It was a big bar.
At the top of the hill?
Not at the top of the hill. No. This was going to Haviland. This is going up the road towards the shul. Right off the corner, right before the next beach, but after the grocery store.
There was a bar there.
There's a bar there.
I
think it was called Scalari's.
I don't remember that bar.
Oh, you don't remember that?
Before
Warren
Beach.
It was nice. It looked like a big fort thing. So we used to tell the story about the fort. Anyhow, I made up stories. This was also like the four stories like Sherlock Tiberio.
You have any Sherlock Tiberio stories you want to tell?
Well, all my grandchildren know already the Sherlock Tiberio. You can ask each one of them. They know Sherlock Tiberio.
Wasn't it only one story?
No.
Something
no.
about honey and...
Oh yeah, one was with the bee. They,
Yeah,
they stole
we'll
all
come
the,
back to those in the next tape.
Yeah.
We're just about out.
Oh, so
So we'll be back.
all right.